Welcome everybody. We're going to start. Okay. All righty. Welcome to the members of the Miami Realtors Association. Everything you always wanted to know about flood insurance, but were afraid to ask in 30 minutes. So Mike and I are going to do 30 minutes of prepared remarks slides, do a little demo of our product, and then we'll be open up for Q&A. So if you feel like you got to run at the bottom of the hour, go for it. We'll send all this information afterwards via email. I am Jason Harris. I'm with CartoFront, and Mike Toffoli is with Acadian Insurance. So we'll be handling the duties today. More importantly, these are the people that you really need to know. Edna is with CartoFront. She's our customer success manager. And Carrie Lyman is vice president of Acadian Insurance. So Edna and Carrie are working on the day-to-day customer success, answering questions. Edna on the CartoFront side, Carrie on the insurance/Acadian flood insurance side. We're right here each and every Tuesday at high noon. The last class of the month, the last Tuesday, this 2 weeks from today, will be in Spanish. So please let your friends know who are Spanish speaking. We'll have that led by Edna and Annabella. Looking forward to that. Here are our goals. Really simply, the number one goal is the number one goal. It's to help you be the most knowledgeable, confident, and profitable realtor in your market. We know that your time is your money. It's your resources. You're making it happen. This is just a piece of the total puzzle, but an important piece. We want to be there when you need us and how you need us, and to be able to advise your clients. Today's program is totally interactive though, so please use the chat function to feel free to ask questions, and then Edna will serve those up to us at the end. Here's our approach today. We've got 4 different chapters, and we're going to kind of walk through them step by step. What's nice is everything is found in our little ebook. It's called Everything You Always Want to Know About Flood Insurance, But We're Afraid to Ask. It comes in both English and Spanish. Very easy flip book electronically that you will get the link to after the program. All right, so let's start with chapter 1, South Florida flood risk. This is why we're in business, right? So across the country, 41 million residential locations are at risk of flooding. And what's probably the most important thing about this map, and the map on the right, is FEMA maps, which are in yellow, overlaid by independent research that's projecting out flood risk for those areas. What's of greatest note is how much green there is, showing where there's hidden risk across the country. And it's not just on the coast, which you would think about, but it's also inland in places like the Appalachians, the Northeast, and the Northwest. And when we look specifically at our market, you know, this is how you make your money. And this is also where a lot of the risk is. And in South Florida, it's 1 in 3 properties are at risk. And you can see FEMA's done a pretty good job in Miami-Dade, but as you go up the coast, especially on the eastern side, more and more hidden risk that we're gonna need to contend with over time. We know that the storms are increasing, and last year was the most busy storm season on record. There were 30 storms. They started before the season even started, like in mid-May, and they continued right up until the end of the season in November, end of November. And when you look at this color coding, this tells quite a story. Louisiana, as we remember, had multiple storms throughout the season. In fact, if you look at the west part of Louisiana, Lake Charles specifically, if you know anybody who's on that border between Louisiana and Texas, they had 2 storms 15 miles apart, right? 15, 1-5, 5 weeks apart. I mean, it was just crazy, the damage that they saw in such a brief amount of time. South Florida, it wasn't your year, and we're happy about that. Now, we don't know what 2021 is going to bring, or 22, or 23, or on and on. And it's not to scare anybody, but it's just the reality of we got to take precaution and really think about things in our realty practice. And this is probably the biggest reason why. There's now data that says that climate change is impacting property values. So it's not just a feel-good green story, emissions. It's now hitting our pocketbooks. And so we know Bal Harbor, Bal Harbor is what we would call a snowflake. But you can't dispute that from 2016 to 2020, Bal Harbor, high net worth area, lost 7.5%. And I know if you can afford Bal Harbor, but even at 7.5%, that's a big drop in 4 years. And we're going to see this across the area. We're going to see this across the country. It also informs a very challenging insurance landscape and pricing. And I'm in the market this month, meeting and greeting with people. And what I'm shocked at, not just the flood insurance and helping people get education on it, but the cost of homeowners. And Mike will talk about all of this, but we want to protect our properties, both with flood and with homeowners, but certainly we want to get the right amount of coverage at the right price, right? So we're going to talk about affordability here today. Now, we're doing this because we want to make sure that you're successful, right? Whether you're representing the buyers or the sellers, whether you're at the beginning of the process, or if you're at from contract to close, okay? We want to make sure that you are knowledgeable, confident, and can be transparent in your dealings regarding flood. Okay. In the chat function, please type in if you've had an opportunity to click on and ask for a quote within the CartoFront for CartoFront within the Miami MLS page. And while we're doing that, I'm going to also move over into doing the demo. So, and we're totally fine with true honesty. So if no's no, totally cool. That's why we're here today. Okay. So, can everybody see CoreLogic matrix and the dashboard? Okay. All right. So we're embedded in each and every listing. So it doesn't matter where you come in from. We're going to pick, in this example, we're going to go to the new properties. And we're going to pick a house. Let's pick this one right here. Let's pick something on the lower end, something that's $350,000, just as an example. Better yet, let's pick this one here. That's $570,000. Okay. So here's the nav bar, right, with all the icons, all the options that you have. And here's the CartoFront icon, our little raindrop. We call our raindrop Azul. We're going to ask for information by clicking on the raindrop. Now, it takes about 10 to 12 seconds. We're taking the data out of the listing, we're scrubbing it, comparing it with some other data, sending it off to the government, sending it off to our private insurance, and then that's going to bring it back into our system momentarily. Wow, this is a really interesting one, okay? This is a great one for Mike and I to talk about. Okay, now, in working with Miami, we wanted to make sure that this page was easy, simple, and not overwhelming. Okay, so there's 3 areas we want to focus on. The first area is the property itself. Okay, so MLS ID. So we'll make sure that you got the right ID number and the right address for this property. Now, again, we're giving you a flood zone, an accurate flood zone. FEMA is saying this is an X zone, which means it's low to moderate risk. Okay. And what we're doing here is we're educating everybody regarding kind of socializing the different zones, right? We'll talk about this in a moment. So this is the first, validating the property and the government's flood zone. The second area is around coverage details, okay? So here you're gonna see 3 columns. The first column on the right is the column for the National Flood Insurance Program. So those of us who are familiar with the National Flood Insurance Program, done by flood zones, their pricing, it's kind of one size fits all. They have kind of a standard approach to things. They view it as a maximum of $250,000 of coverage for property, for the building, and then $100,000 for personal property. We're also introducing you to a private insurance quote, two of them actually, by our insurance provider, Beyond Floods, which is offered by National General Insurance, which National General now is part of the Allstate family, okay? And here we're providing two different quotes, right? The property value is 570. So this first column here, column 1, is showing apples to apples, 250 and 100, and some other options here, right? Their pricing is $23.28, and Mike will talk about this in a moment, but it's almost 4 times more. They're seeing something in the risk of something that should be low to moderate that the government's not seeing, and the government's going to subsidize this insurance, okay? The column in the middle shows a little bit more insurance in a $50,000 increment to show that you can stair step the Beyond Floods price all the way up to 1.5 million. And we've just shown you what it looks like just to go up a little bit and show what the price break difference is there, okay? So now look, it's almost 6 times, right? Big discrepancy. With each and every quote request, there's an ID number. And importantly here, this is intended to protect you, the realtor, as well as ourselves. Everything has a disclaimer, right? The insurance body here in Florida, the Florence Insurance Regulation, very strict rules about insurance sales and who can do it. Mike can only talk about insurance. I can't. I'm not licensed in Florida, and so neither are you. We want to make sure that you're protected. This disclaimer does that. Now, the third piece of information that's valid is around communication. So our entire system is bilingual, right? So by clicking on this, now you can see everything in Spanish, including all the hoverovers. Our entire system turns to Spanish when you click to Espanol. I'll go back to English now. Now, there's 3 ways that you can communicate this to your client. The first way is by clicking here and getting a shareable link. Hang on one second, folks. It looks like I might be letting somebody in. Okay, hang on one second. Okay, great. So now I've got a shareable link. I can either drop that in an email or I can drop it in a text. That private link will bring them right back to this page, okay? Secure link. Second way to do it is by, say you're having a showing, you want to print out a PDF and have it at the showing. Click here, and this is how it looks, right? All the information contained in one page. Again, here's the disclaimer, and then here's Michael's agency, right? So that if you have questions or your client has questions, easily reach out to them through that phone number. Then the third way is by emailing it. Click here. You're presented by a new box. We ask you then to add the client's name and information, the email. Once you've done that, their name appears in a drop-down box. I'll pick myself. And then you can email that quote off and copy yourself and copy Mike's insurance agency so that they're at the ready to answer any questions that you or your client might have. Now, I'm going to go into my email box, click refresh, and here's how it comes in for your client that you sent it to, powered by CartoFront, introducing the insurance side, right? Because Mike can now represent the quote. I can't as CartoFront. Flood insurance options made simple. Everything that you've seen now is in one easy to read email for your client. Any questions can connect with Acadian. And then at the bottom here, we talk about privacy, right? We as a team, us and Acadian, take privacy very seriously. We will only contact you if you choose to contact us, right? If you need help, you or your client, Mike is happy to do information, free consultations, but only at your request. The information sits on our system until asked for, and a request is made. We will never, ever, ever sell that information. We will never spam you. We take it that seriously. If your client wants to schedule something with Mike, okay, click on this button. They get into a scheduling platform, click right here, set it up at their leisure. Okay, that's the demonstration. Let's come back now into the presentation. Okay, again, in your chat box, quiz question. In South Florida, what percentage of properties are at risk for flood? And I'll do the Jeopardy. Da na 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 da 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 da. Okay, hands off keyboards. 33%, 1 in 3. You know, the old idea is if it's east of 95, you need flood protection. You know, with these numbers 1 in 3, I think it's advisable now that anywhere in South Florida, especially with the simplicity and the ease of use, go in and look for the raindrop and get a quick quote, get at least understand if it's bigger than a bread box. Okay, I know you've all been waiting for our guest. He's been in the green room, getting ready, preparing his pitch in front of a mirror. Let's welcome, all the way from South Florida, Michael, AKA Mike Toffoli.
Thanks, Johnny. Good to be here. All right. What is considered a flood? Everybody kind of has an idea, but there's actually a definition that is used for insurance purposes. And that definition is excess of water on land that is normally dry, affecting 2 or more acres of land or 2 or more properties. So it's a little bit more specific, but generally speaking, what you envision a flood being would meet that definition. Floods are caused by storms, hurricanes, snow melt, and then water backup from dams, levees, so forth. Flood is something that is a natural event. It would have to be a natural event in order to be covered by flood insurance. So if there's an internal pipe break, for example, in a home, that's not going to be covered by flood insurance. Most likely would be covered by homeowners insurance. If there's a hole in the roof, maybe a tree falls through in a storm and water comes in, broken windows, same thing, wind blows windows in, that would be covered, that would be considered wind coverage, and that would be covered by your homeowner's policy. Flood insurance is a policy that covers just flood. It is a separate policy from homeowners. Homeowners insurance does not include flood coverage. So it's a very specific policy just for this one peril. Flood zones, we hear that term all the time. A lot of people say, well, something's in a flood zone, it's not in a flood zone. Well, actually everything's in a flood zone. It's just which flood zone is it in? And these are geographic areas that FEMA, who runs the National Flood Insurance Program, have developed to kind of define what the pricing is going to be for a flood insurance policy. So this is what the X zone is, what people are typically referring to when they say something's not in a flood zone. It is in a flood zone. It's just a moderate to low risk area. And so a lot of people think, well, if it's in an X zone, I don't need it. More importantly, if it's in an X zone, lenders typically don't require it. But 25 to 30% of flood claims are paid every year in these X zones. So even though they're not considered hazardous, a lot of floods still occur in these zones.
Hey, Mike, really quickly, Hurricane Harvey made big news in Houston a couple of years ago. Not only was it really a very difficult hurricane, but what was the percentage again of properties that were in X zones that were affected? It was a pretty high number, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was over 50%
Right.
of the flooded area in Houston and other parts of Texas, South Texas, that were affected by Hurricane Harvey. They were in X zones, and those folks had no coverage.
Right, and we'll get into pricing in a little bit, but I mean, from a peace of mind point of view, right? Help us a little bit with X zones and the government or private and how that's viewed.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into a little more detail about how they calculate how the pricing works. But generally speaking, the National Flood Insurance Program will set a rate for each zone, and it will apply across the entirety of that zone. Whereas the private flood companies we're going to talk about will actually get much more specific to the elevation of that property primarily, and try and come up with, a more appropriate price for that specific piece of land and the building that's on it.
Yeah.
The National Flood Insurance Program has operated this way for a long time. Although they are working on adapting to the same type of pricing mechanism that the private companies are using. And we'll get into that in a few minutes.
Is it fair to say though, and then we'll move to the next slide in a second here, but is it fair to say that peace of mind could be had for, under $1,000 for most properties?
Yeah. I mean, I think typically, a max cover policy in the X zone in South Florida, you're talking $600,000 to $700,000 a year.
$600 to $700 a year, right?
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, these are the other flood zones that are the more high risk areas. The zones starting with an A prefix tend to be more inland, but subject to substantial flooding. The V zones are more coastal. Now, all of these, if you're going to get a loan on the property, that lender will require a flood insurance policy if the property is located in these zones. Okay, true or false? Flood insurance is part of homeowners insurance. False. Flood insurance is not a covered peril in a homeowner's policy. In order to cover flood, you have to have a separate policy purchased through a qualified insurance agent. Okay, you've heard me and Jason talk about two different sources of flood insurance out there, one being the National Flood Insurance Program that we're all familiar with. It's been around for a long time. It's run by the federal government. But lately, a number of other private insurance companies have come into the market and are offering flood coverage. We represent one of those, that is National General Insurance, and they're what they call Beyond Floods. Both the National Flood Insurance Program and the Beyond Floods market are available through the CartoFront platform. And National General is, just as an aside, is a subsidiary of Allstate and rated A- by AM Best. Okay, how do they differ? Well, the provider, National Flood Insurance Program, is a government program. Insurance companies, such as National General, can offer that as an administrator, but effectively the federal government is who is bearing the risk and who will pay the claim on that if there's damage. Private markets, though, they basically take the risk themselves and pay the claims out of their own funds. Pricing, as we mentioned, National Flood Insurance Program rates are determined by which flood zone it's in, and they can be modified slightly by elevation certificates, but not a lot. While on the other hand, the the private flood insurance markets really kind of zone in on the specific latitude and longitude and the elevation of that particular piece of property to give a more specific pricing. Now, as I mentioned, the National Flood Insurance Program is moving in that direction, and they're from what we've heard, they're now looking at bringing out a new pricing structure that looks very similar to what a lot of the private carriers are offering in the fall of this year.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, you sent an article today or yesterday that is going to be making the rounds. It was in the Insurance Journal. It talks to, there's been a recent study about the price increases and specifically what this might mean for South Florida. Can you just give 30 seconds on it?
Yeah, you know, it's pretty scary, actually. Indications are that a study's been done that indicates that the federal government's pricing of even in X zones is probably a third of what it should be to properly be able to cover the risk.
Yeah.
And that's, if the National Flood Insurance Program is going to be adjusting its rates to that type of rating program,
right.
I think that's going to have a chilling impact on the market, because
Yes,
the higher the insurance is, it affects the value of the property.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Okay. A few more differences. National Flood Insurance Program only offers up to a maximum of $250,000 for the building and $100,000 for personal property. So if you've got a bigger house, it doesn't quite get you there. Beyond floods, however, can go up as high as 1.5 million for the building and up to 50% of that for personal property. Deductibles, there's only one option for the National Flood Insurance Program. It's $1,250 for the building and an additional $1,250 for your personal property, so a total of $2,500. But there are multiple deductible options available. This is for the part that you pay for yourself out of your pocket before the insurance company responds. You can go as low as $1,000 or as high as $10,000 based on how much risk you're willing to bear. And of course, the pricing moves accordingly. The lower the deductible, the higher the premium will be. And finally, what optional coverages are available? There's really not any optional coverages available in the National Flood Insurance Program, but there are a couple of neat ones that are available in Beyond Floods. One is what's called loss of use coverage, and what that provides is in the event that your house can't be lived in because of the flood damage and you have to rent somewhere else or get a hotel room, those costs could be covered by your policy. Additionally, if you've got other buildings on the property, the most common example I can think of is if you've got kind of a detached garage, that would not be covered unless you purchased other buildings coverage on an optional basis from on the private side. You could buy a separate policy from the NFIP for that as well. Timing.
I moved quickly on that. Sorry about that, Mike.
That's no problem. Generally speaking, if a flood policy is required by a lender in order for you to close, there isn't going to be a waiting period. But if it's not required by a lender, if the National Flood Insurance Program will make you wait 30 days before your policy can take effect. There's a lot more flexibility with Beyond Floods. It's only a 5-day waiting period. And the point of that is that they want to make sure that somebody's not just trying to buy a flood insurance policy because there's a hurricane off the coast, and they're basically just now thinking they want to get a policy. They probably should have bought it a lot sooner, and the insurance companies want to try and limit that type of behavior from taking place. The last point is something I want to focus in on a little bit, because the example that Jason gave earlier is really right down the road here.
Right.
I mean, it's a great example that you picked there. Pricing tends to be better in the National Flood Insurance Program in the higher risk properties because the federal government has subsidized pricing. While beyond floods tends to be better when the risk is not that high, low to medium risk properties. And what's interesting about all of this is that if you go back to that presentation or that example, and I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I can do it. Hang on one second. Because I think let's illustrate this, because I do agree. We kind of hit on one here today. That's okay. Can everybody see that?
There's a couple of things that are interesting about this. First of all, the National Flood Insurance Program says that it's in an X zone, which means that it's low to moderate risk, and it's priced it accordingly. But the private carriers who have much more specific information about the parcel itself have priced it much higher, which would indicate that within that X zone, there are perhaps some low-lying areas, this being one of them, where water can collect. And they've recognized that. And so their pricing is significantly higher than what the National Flood Insurance Program pricing is. So they recognize that this is a higher risk property and they're going to be more expensive on those higher risk properties. And they just define them better than the National Flood Insurance Program does. So if someone is buying this property, grab that flood insurance policy from the National Flood Insurance Program at $572 a year. It's money well spent.
Right. And two additional points here, Mike. One is, and this goes back to where you were a moment ago about this risk rating 2.0, right? So again, in the current system right now, everything's based on these flood zones for the government versus the private side is all pricing based on the specific individual property, right? Those are the two differences, right? So on the public side, it's kind of a blanketed approach. And there might be a house right next to this house that the risk is the same, right? The risk might be the same, but the pricing might be different side by side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
The other piece, and again, the reason why you just said go out, again, if you're listing this property, for example, this is a great one to show. It says, hey, compare your information, but get peace of mind for less than $600, right? But if the government is changing the rating system over time, these prices are all going to be about the same though, right?
They are, but the federal government is going to phase it in.
Okay.
So I think there's going to be limitations on an annual basis as to how much they can add, somewhere in the 10 to 25%.
Okay, gotcha. So it's not all going to happen at one time.
That's right.
Okay, so there's no fear. We're not trying to cause any rush to judgment on this, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. So now we're back in the presentation. And again, feel free to put questions into the chat box. We'll be answering them momentarily.
Okay. True or false? Beyond Floods is a private flood insurance option. True. Offered by National General, offers flood insurance options, which are available on the CartoFront platform. Coverages and claims. What does flood insurance cover? Well, there's the two sections, generally speaking, of coverage, one being building and the other being personal property or contents. And as it relates to the building coverage, it kind of breaks down into three subgroups. The actual building structure itself, things that are permanently attached to it, like paneling, carpeting, furnaces, water heaters, and if there's a separate building policy for the garage, that would be covered. So the second section is all the things that are kind of attached. Building is the first section, and then finally, if there's damage to those things and there's debris on the property that has to be removed, that debris removal is covered as well. Contents, these are things that aren't really nailed down. Personal belongings like clothing, furniture, electronics, stuff that you can pick up and carry with you. or move fairly readily. There's also some valuable items there, such as artwork, but there are limitations on how much is covered for those very high dollar items. Things that generally aren't covered, like water damage that is not related to a flood, that causes moisture, mildew, or mold in a home. That might be covered to some degree by a homeowner's policy, would not be covered by a flood policy. Currency, precious metals, valuable papers, things like that would not be covered by a flood policy. Outside of the home, landscaping, as well as wells, septic systems, decks, patios, hot tubs, swimming pools, unfortunately not covered by flood insurance policy. If you have any financial loss to your business, what we're talking about here is really, flood insurance for a home. So that really wouldn't come into play. When you do have a claim on your flood insurance policy, how are the payments, or how is what you're owed calculated? Well, if the home is your primary residence, replacement cost value will be used to determine how much you're going to be paid to repair or replace the building, as well as your contents. If it's not your primary residence, actual cash value will be used to calculate how much you're going to get for your contents. Replacement cost value is just like it sounds. It's how much it costs to repair or replace something. Actual cash value could also be called depreciated value. It's the value of the item that's been damaged, with a factor taken for how old it is or how much wear and tear there is on it.
Great. Mike, thank you so much. And Mike will be available to answer any questions on the insurance side in a moment. And he's here all week, so try the veal. That's an old vaudeville joke. Sorry about that. I had to get that in there. A little borscht belt for you New Yorkers. Okay. Resources. Edna, I can't see the chat right now because I've got the screen up, but hopefully we'll be sending this off to you, both the English and the Spanish versions. This is our little ebook, and I'll show that to you in a moment, but this is a really great resource that can stay right on your, at a moment's notice, either on your phone or your computer. Oh, there it is. We're just going to go right to it. Okay. So this is what it looks like. It's basically a little electronic flyer of exactly what we just took everybody through. There's the flood zone risks side by side. Mike did a beautiful job of laying out the differences between the two, public and private. So this is all available to you and is coming your way. Let me go back into the presentation now. Live television, everybody. This is how it works on the big show. Okay. All right, so that's one resource of value for you. Here's another resource, and actually this is really valuable. If you like what you saw today, please tell your broker. We are offering 3 different types of trainings. We'll do a 5-minute quick, it's almost like a quick advertisement and a demo just to whet everybody's appetite. We can consolidate this presentation into 15 minutes and take a couple of questions. And then today's presentation, full length, 25 minutes. Easy to do it, sign up at Calendly /CartoFront. On the landing page, our friends at Miami Realtors, Lizette, Connie, the team, trainers, been fabulous. All these resources are right there to fingertip. MiamiRealtors.com/. Everything is completely free to you. Everything, the entire system, quotes, educational materials. so forth and so on. Within all these materials, links to these details. If you have insomnia, I would recommend the FEMA flood zone definitions. For sure to put you to bed, for sure. And then Mike's agency on the bottom and Beyond Floods, who we're representing on the platform. Okay. So thank you for hanging in there. We went a little over the 30 minutes, but now we're ready for Q&A. Edna, please help Mike and I in facilitating.
All right, so the first question that we had was a question about a same building in high risk. What will be the price compared to 500 to 600 a year?
Okay, interesting question, difficult to answer. If it's in a high risk flood zone with the NFIP, it's a virtual certainty that it'll be much more expensive than the $600 that we just saw. The difference between the way pricing is set in the National Flood Insurance Program and with the private companies, though, is that there aren't really zones with the private companies. They look at every single risk. So it's possible that even though it might be in a high risk zone, just as we saw here just a few minutes ago, something could be in a high risk zone, but the private flood insurance people look at the actual elevation of that property and say, wait a minute, it's up higher than the rest of the property around it, so it's less likely to flood. So it's possible that even though it's in a National Flood Insurance Program high risk zone, that they would find that it's not, the private market would find that it's not a high risk property and price it, in the range that, we just saw. It's, every risk is different.
Right.
Next question we have is, can NFIP and private insurance be stacked if the property value exceeds 250K?
Yes, that is an option.
And Mike, how would that work then? So let's walk through that. So someone finds a property that's high risk. It's on say it's a coastal property and it's a VE or something, right? So let's just say it's $1 million house, right? So they take the government for the 250 because it's affordable, right? It's subsidized. And then what happens?
Then what you would do is your agent would help you with something called an excess flood insurance policy,
Okay.
which would pick up at the $250,000 level and go up to the $1 million level. So it would come in on a layered approach on top of the National Flood Insurance Program policy.
Okay. And your agents are equipped to be able to do that,
Yes.
right? Okay,
Yes.
great. Good to know. Thank you.
So far, those are all the questions. If anybody would like to unmute themselves to ask a question, please feel free to do so. Oh, we have another one in the chat. It says, can the owner have 2 insurances?
They can, as long as they don't cover the same thing. It has occurred, in the past where people had 2 policies for the same risk but didn't know about it. You're typically not supposed to do that, but if that happened, each of the insurance companies would split what they owed on the policy. So you wouldn't actually get a windfall. You would still only get the same amount.
Yeah, and there's no benefit to that really, right?
Right.
Yeah, gotcha. Someone else had asked, I think I also saw someone came late. There were a few people who chimed in, after the beginning. We're gonna publish this one, Ed. Let's put this on YouTube and make this available to people, because I think this is a really valuable one. And the example, I think, is illuminating for people to really understand. And Mike's done a beautiful job to explain the differences between NFIP and the private. And then this last question was great too, about kind of excess. I think these are all good, valuable educational pieces. Okay. Any last questions? We appreciate you making time today during your busy schedule. Again, thank you very much. Edna will package everything and send it to you. And we look forward to talking with you later.